want to start off, Roger and Lee, I want to start off by congratulating you guys on your film having its world premiere at South by Southwest this year. That must be really exciting for you guys, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a dream come true in many ways. It's our first feature, and what a great festival to be debuting it at.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I think it kind of suits the type of film that it is, you know, the independent spirit of the film. You know, the fact that it's quite a left field movie as well. I was kind of delighted when South by said they wanted to take it. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the chance to watch The Feast, and yeah, it is quite the horror experience. So to start off, for people who might just be hearing about the film, can you give me a little synopsis of what the movie is about? Roger, you want to take this one?
The Feast is, on the surface of it, it's the story of a family, a wealthy family, who have a contemporary, modern, sleek house in the middle of the Welsh countryside, and they use this place as their holiday home. They've made a lot of money from selling parcels of their land to a company who mine for minerals, and they're hosting a dinner party for some of their neighbours, who they hope to persuade to start selling their land to the developers, and invite a young woman to be the waitress at the dinner party that they're hosting. But unbeknownst to them, they're inviting quite a sinister force into their home for the evening. And she takes her revenge on this family for what they're doing to the environment.
Yeah. So, Lee, anything you want to add to that synopsis? And I don't want to give anything away here, but just kind of giving people an idea of what the movie's about.
Well, I guess, that's sort of the story in brief. And then thematically, it's about the importance of being true to yourself and your people. And it's also, in many ways, a sort of an environmental horror about the way the planet kind of takes its revenge on those of us who abuse it.
Yeah. So where did this story come from? And I'm also maybe even more interested in what influences inspired the style of horror that we see. Lee, maybe this is a good one for you.
We'll just look at the story and the inspiration of the story, Horan, Roger, and I'll go on to the influences.
Yeah. Okay. Inspiration for the story, we started looking at a lot of Welsh cultural stories and folklores. Particularly, I think the conversation started when we were talking about a series of medieval Welsh tales called the Mabinogion, and we thought about the weird and wonderful things that happen in the Mabinogion, like a woman being made out of flowers and the ability to transform into animals. Because we very much wanted it to be a story which felt of this place. So that was the initial beginnings for it. And also, I remember seeing films like It Follows, while It Follows gives you fantastic horror, fantastic scares. It delivers on all of that. It's also saying something. It's got all those themes going on underneath it about society and place. And I've wanted to make a horror film, but a horror film which is trying to communicate larger themes to the audience as well. So I guess it's a combination of those factors for me.
Yeah, that was the sort of starting point, those Welsh myths, and it struck us that there's something sort of inherently horrific about them. You know, it involves people being turned into animals. It involves parents eating their children. They are sort of, as I say, generally awful, but wonderful as well. And then in terms of influences, I guess, as Roger was saying, it's about I mean, I've always loved the horror genre. I used to kind of be dragged along with my cousin to watch, at an inappropriate age, to watch sort of Nightmare on Elm Street and all of those sorts of kind of commercial horrors. But I'd always wanted to sort of combine the fun and the scares with actually saying something. So that was the desire to weave those two components together. And it struck me that a big influence on me when we were sort of discussing this early on was Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, which does that incredibly well. I mean, I try to avoid sort of, some directors tend to sort of almost do homages to other directors' work, and I try to avoid sort of influence in a way, and pick up things along the way. I mean, I come from an acting background, and theatre's sort of quite prominent, so I draw on that. I love architecture, I love photography, but I guess in terms of films, you know, there's probably a little bit of Peter Strickland in there, just in terms of the theatricality and the melodrama of it. There's definitely in terms of the contemporary edge of it, there's probably a bit of Ari Aster in there as well, you know. I mean, it was a bit of a coincidence, but what we were trying to do with this, in the same way that he did with Midsummer, I think, was to almost to subvert the cliche of what a Welsh horror film might look like. So it's not set in an old crumbly stone cottage. It's in this rather sleek, modern, contemporary built house. It's not set in the winter. It's in the summer, when we can see the glory and the majesty of the Welsh landscape. So yeah, there's a bit of that in there. There's loads of stuff in there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that, gosh, I was picking up all of those influences, and I think that I appreciate that confirmation of like the styles that you guys put into the film. So that's fantastic. So as far as I've seen, it looks like you both have had extensive history in TV production. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. I wanted to know how making this feature-length film compared to your more episodic work.
I loved it because I had very few executive producers to I was going to say meddle, but of course you're recording this, so I better not say meddle. Yeah, I had no executive producers. You know, it was an incredibly liberating experience with just myself and Roger kind of self-censoring or not, as the case may be. But actually, what I found hard was that freedom, was the fact that I wasn't answerable to anybody else, and that was the difficulty in a way. You know, when you don't have parameters, where do you go? You can go anywhere. But it was a great creative experience for me.
Yeah, it's the joy of not being contained by the commercial hour of television, isn't it? With your commercial breaks and everything that comes along with that. And also, I guess, people's expectations. That was the great thing about this project, was that the funders knew or hoped that we would come back with a horror film, because that's what they thought they were getting. And I think I had so many conversations with people who'd thought they'd made horror films in the past, and had said, yeah, it's not really a horror film though. It's more of a psychological story, or it's more of a thriller. That we kind of went into it knowing that at the very least we would make a horror film. But aside from that, people didn't really have expectations of what it was going to be, which is so different from TV. Yeah. Because they know very clearly what that they're going to have, their thriller or their crime drama.
And also, a lot of TV, regardless of what genre you're working in, is quite naturalistic, and this is very definitely not naturalistic. I mean, it goes on a big journey in terms of style. So that was great for me as well, having done a lot of crime drama, which is naturalistic. This was slightly off the wall.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great way of putting it, but it's an experience. I mean, that's what I got out of it. Definitely something I wish I'd been able to see in theaters, but yeah, quite the midnight horror experience at one point in the film. But let's talk about the characters. I especially want to talk about the family and how each member of the family is kind of their own they're peculiar in their own ways, right? How was this cast of characters developed? Oh, this would probably be a good question for Roger.
Yeah, it's character's a very organic process for me. So I guess it started with the parents. It started with this sense that they were people who in their youth had been incredibly aspirational, and had left Wales to succeed in the wider world. Dad has obviously gone into politics, and they are, on one level, they are the respectable middle class, upper class couple who have had children. But as we know from, as you'll know from watching the film, those children have very big problems of their own. They haven't been nurtured. And this, is one of those themes to do with the dislocation of people from place and the place where they belong and their traditions and their culture. Because of that dislocation, I've always thought of those two boys as people who haven't been able to flourish. So we have Gweirydd, who is he's the triathlete in the film. He's constantly working towards something, never quite getting there, and just a very strange creature. And we wanted to reflect that strangeness in his look. In fact, he's completely hairless, and even down to how translucent his skin is at times. And then at the other end of it, you've got a brother who isn't really going to go anywhere, however hard he tries, and is battling his own kind of addictions. And yet, we talked a lot about this, the fact that they are, to all intents and purposes, two men in their early 20s who, if they wanted to leave that house, they could. They could just open the door and they could just walk away. But there is something about their dysfunctionality and the family's dysfunctionality, which means that they can't bring themselves to do that.
Yeah. What was of interest to me and then to the actors when we sort of got under the surface of the piece and started to sort of investigate it forensically was the fact that they're all actually, in one way or another, they're all addicts. They're all addicted to something. And in that sense, it's a meditation on addiction. I don't know, did Roger intend that? Probably, because he's very clever. But no, it's funny, isn't it, how when you start to sort of scratch away at things, how certain themes come to light, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And I certainly appreciated that and got that out of these characters. And by the way, fantastic performance from the cast. I think everyone did such a good job bringing their characters to life and making this such a compelling film to watch. A lot of it is in how they perform, so that's awesome. I trying to make sure that I'm good on time here, but let's go here. I want to know more about the editing, because the film is broken up into 6 acts. And you're following the family through these acts. And I guess I wanted to know more about the approach to editing the film.
I think it's fair to say that it's a journey from naturalism to sort of theatrical horror in many ways. And the approach to editing was to try and emphasize in the first sort of act, I guess, the naturalism of that situation. So we get very hard cuts. There was a constant talk actually between me and the editor of trying to because even though it's naturalistic, you want to create this sense that something is about to happen, always something shocking. So what we talked about a lot was sort of editing in a very unnatural place, in a way where actions were sort of half complete, which is really counterintuitive to how what you'd normally do. I think you'd allow an action to kind of complete itself and then you'd cut out. So that was where we started with that. And then of course gradually as the order of the family kind of breaks down, and the structure of the piece breaks down, the editing becomes far more erratic. You know, the sound sometimes leads the edit, the picture edit, sometimes the picture edit leads the sound. Pictures often kind of allied and sit on top of each other in a rather sort of montage-like way. So that's the journey of the film, which hopefully reflects the aesthetic journey of the film, which hopefully reflects the kind of the spiral downwards that the family go on.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That all makes sense, and I think that the audiences will get that out of the film. I love the progression of it. I loved how it escalated, and I think that's something that also happens in the sound design is how there's this tension built with sound, and then there'll be like a cutoff, and then it'll cut to another scene. I mean, how tension is built in this movie is so well done, and I think that will appeal to audiences looking for a good tense horror film. We're coming to the end of our time. Any final thoughts on what you want audiences to take away from this film? Let's start with Roger, and then Lee. You can have the final word.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we set out trying to make a contemporary European horror film in the Welsh language, you know, and in that respect, I think it's certainly unlike anything that's come out of our corner of the world before. But always for me, you know, it's about entertainment and hopefully giving somebody something to think about as well. You know, that it's important that they are left with questions and just inspired by it, hopefully.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, entertainment is key, you know, to have a good time at the cinema or wherever you may be watching it. And then secondly, hopefully they'll pick up on some of the messages that are contained therein. And then I just want them to go and tell their friends that it's a cool little movie so that everybody sees it.
Well, I will certainly be a part of that, and hopefully getting people to check it out when it debuts at South by Southwest. Again, congratulations on your film making it to the festival, and I hope it has a long and successful life run, maybe in theaters or in homes or wherever people want to take in a good tense horror film. So. All right, I think that's the end of our time, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me here and for having this conversation. This is great, and I really appreciate you talking about your film.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you. Bye.